I need to tell you something about law school. I've been giving you the polite version. For months now, on this channel, in my live streams, I've been saying things like law school is changing and make sure you do your research and leaving it there. But a few months ago, a student called me because 3 different banks had rejected her for a private loan to cover the gap between her federal aid and her tuition. Not because of her credit, but because of her school. The banks looked at the school's placement data and said no. 2 years ago, that could not have happened. The program that made that impossible just ended. And that's one of about 6 different things that changed in the last year. I am watching the biggest shift in legal education I've ever seen happen in real time, and almost nobody applying to law school right now understands what it means for them. So today I want to tell you the entire thing. The real version, which actually has genuinely good news in it if you know where to look. Because the same changes that are creating risk for some applicants are creating an enormous opportunity for others. And the things that put you on the right side of that line are entirely within your control. Until last year, there was a federal loan program called Grad Plus that would lend you the entire cost of law school, including tuition, living expenses, everything, no matter where you went or what that school's outcomes looked like. You got in, and the government wrote the check. That's how law schools could charge $85,000 a year, because students could borrow $85,000 a year. But then the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed in the middle of last year, capped federal borrowing at $50,000 per year with a $200,000 lifetime limit. A private law school easily costs $270,000 over 3 years. And so there is a $70,000 gap that federal loans aren't going to cover. So now students need private lenders, and private lenders actually care whether you can pay them back. They look at job placement data, salary outcomes, bar passage rates. If it's strong numbers from the school, they're willing to lend. But if the school has weak numbers, they're not going to lend. And so that student I mentioned, we'll call her Priya. She had a 3.5 GPA, 157 LSAT, first-generation college graduate. She'd gotten into a private law school in the Southeast with a partial scholarship. Exactly the kind of student that law schools have been admitting for decades. Her federal loans covered about $100,000 of her total costs, but she needed another $20,000. And 3 out of 4 lenders rejected her, while the 4th offered her a variable rate that she could not afford. Now, what happened to Priya is not an edge case. It is becoming the new normal at schools where the outcomes data doesn't hold up to outside scrutiny. The financial architecture that made legal education work for 2 decades just got rewritten. And the loan repayment system changed also. Income-based repayment plans were replaced with new rules and higher monthly payments. Public service loan forgiveness still exists, but the entire structure around it is different now. If you're planning a public interest career, the math you would have run 2 years ago is going to give you the wrong answer now. You've got to run it again under the new system. And all of this means the question of whether you're on the right side of this rewrite depends more than ever on how you enter. Now here is where it gets counterintuitive. Applications surged 18% last cycle and another 12% on top of that in the current cycle. These are record high numbers. And you would think that gives schools more power, because with more applicants, schools have more options for who they can accept. That means they can be more selective. But the opposite has actually happened. Total applications are up, yes, but the students with the best numbers, the strongest credentials, the ones who actually move a school's median and protect its ranking, are in higher demand than ever. Every school is bidding for them, and so scholarship offers at the top of the range have hit historic levels. Schools are throwing unprecedented scholarship money at high LSAT applicants because those students are the most valuable asset in the market. Now, at the same time, the American Bar Association has been letting schools go LSAT optional. They're letting them admit students without any standardized test. This year, there are 14 different law schools that could theoretically admit their entire class this way. And when that happens, the common yardstick for pricing disappears. Schools are going to start guessing what applicants are worth. And if they're guessing, that means they're overspending on some applicants, underspending on others. And so their scholarship budgets increase and their revenue per student drops. And this is the part that gets missed in the test optional debate. If you are an applicant with a strong LSAT score, what LSAT optional does is remove your strongest negotiating tool. That score is the clearest, most legible signal you can send in a market that's getting harder to read. So taking it away doesn't level the playing field for you, it takes away your leverage. Imagine two scholarship offers from the same school, same admission cycle. One student with a 161 LSAT, the other with a 169 LSAT, same GPA. The difference in their aid packages is roughly $135,000 over 3 years from this same school. That is the market right now. Every point in the upper range is worth more in real dollars than it has been in years. So the money's changed and the schools are in a bidding war. But there's one more piece, and that ties everything together. The margin for error in choosing a law school has gotten a lot thinner from multiple directions at once. There's a lot of headlines about AI right now, but AI is not replacing lawyers. It is changing, though, how firms hire at the entry level. The pattern is looking pretty consistent. Fewer junior associates, better tools, same output. A litigation partner on LinkedIn recently told me that work requiring 6 associates 2 years ago now takes 2 associates with an AI tool. The associates they hire are better, and they have to be. They need fewer of them so the firms can afford to be pickier. So the top of the market is thriving, doing better than ever, big law starting salaries at record highs, but what's getting compressed is the middle, those $60,000 to $90,000 a year associate positions at regional firms that used to absorb the middle of every graduating class. AI is not eliminating the need for lawyers, but it's raising the premium on entering from a position of strength. And a lot of students are rushing to law school right now because AI is disrupting other careers. So law feels relatively safer, and they're going to graduate in a couple of years into a legal job market where AI has meaningfully narrowed the exact entry-level pipeline they're going to law school to enter. And this has happened before, of course, in a different context. The 2008 recession drove people into law school, and they graduated into the worst legal hiring market in a generation, and that cycle might be repeating again. Not saying don't go to law school, but you do want to go in with your eyes open. And on top of that, most law schools depend almost entirely on tuition to survive. Many of them borrowed to expand during the recent boom where they built new buildings, got new facilities, and that was against enrollment projections, assuming the good times would continue. But when revenue drops, as it probably will, some of those schools won't be able to make their loan payments. Imagine, for example, a school enrolling 200 first years at an average of $30,000 a year in net tuition. They're getting about $6 million a year from that class. If they lose 30 students, they've got to raise scholarship offers to fill the remaining seats, and that drops to roughly $4.5 million. So across all 3 years, that's a $3 to $4 million gap in a $25 to $30 million budget. And so if that school borrowed to build a building during the boom, the math isn't going to work. We've also got the demographic cliff, meaning the college-age population is shrinking. The bar exam is changing. There's that new next-gen bar exam starting up. And states like Florida and Texas are fracturing the national accreditation system under the ABA. Now, none of these factors in isolation is catastrophic, but they all reduce the cushion that law schools have to work with. So you want to choose a financially stable school with strong outcomes. That is the most important decision you can make in this process. If you can get a full ride at a school, but it closes during your 2L year, it's worth nothing. Now, I want to pause here because I know what a lot of you are thinking. I run an LSAT prep and coaching business, so of course I'm going to tell you the LSAT matters more. But I'm going to be honest about that. Yes, I do have a financial interest in people taking the LSAT seriously, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But everything I just walked you through, the lending caps, the bidding wars, the way private lenders now evaluate schools, the compression in entry-level hiring, none of that's my opinion. You can look it up all yourself on the news sites. The loan caps are in federal legislation. The scholarship trends are in the 509 reports. The hiring data comes from the NALP. You can verify all of that in 15 minutes with a Google search. What I am saying is, when you put all these changes together, they all point in the same direction. In this market, the leverage you bring into admissions matters more than it used to. And the clearest, most controllable source of that leverage is your LSAT score. And if that's self-serving, you're fine, I'll take it. But that also happens to be true. And I'd rather tell you something I benefited from than tell you something comforting that costs you 6 figures in debt. Now, I actually think with all these changes, this is one of the best moments in a generation to go to law school if you understand the new rules. When the gap between a strategic decision and a default decision gets wider, the students who are strategic benefit disproportionately. Every change I described creates problems for some applicants and creates opportunities for other applicants. And the things that put you on the right side of that demarcation line are entirely within your control. Law school scholarship budgets are higher than ever. Schools are competing for strong applicants more than ever before. And so if you invest the time to genuinely maximize your LSAT score, you are setting yourself up for success, for a trajectory that will set you up the rest of your legal career for decades. So let me make this real with an example. I had a student this past cycle, we'll call him Daniel. He came to me with a 159 LSAT score, good GPA, good school list, and he wanted to apply right away. And I get that, because when you've been thinking about law school for months or years and you finally feel ready, the last thing you want to hear from somebody is to wait. But that's what I told him to do. I said, wait, just wait 3 more months, prep seriously, retake the LSAT. And he pushed back, said he didn't want to lose a cycle, said his score was good enough. He was frustrated. He was just raring to go. And I understood, because if this were 5 years ago, maybe he would have been right. Maybe a 159 LSAT with a strong GPA would have been a perfectly fine position to apply from. But in this market today in 2026, a 159 LSAT is not really good enough, and it leaves a lot on the table. He waited, he retook, he got a 167. Now, those 8 points moved him from a partial scholarship at a school ranked in the 50s to a near full ride at a school ranked in the 30s, a different school with different and better employment outcomes, with a better alumni network, and roughly $140,000 less in total debt. Under the new borrowing caps, Daniel doesn't have a funding gap. He doesn't need private loans, doesn't need to worry about whether a bank thinks his school is good enough. That problem does not exist for him. The same person with the same GPA, same personal statement, just 3 additional months of studying for the LSAT. Now, think about somebody with a similar GPA who applied that same cycle with a 158 and took the first offer. They're looking at $200,000 or more in debt from a school with weaker employment outcomes and a less certain financial future. $140,000 apart for 2 students in the same graduating class. The world does still need lawyers, always will, and the world is getting ever more complex, more regulated, more disrupted, and they arguably need more lawyers as a result, not fewer. And the JD is still one of the most flexible credentials you can earn. The question has never been whether law school is worth it. The question is whether you approach it seriously enough to capture the value that's available to you. Now, this playbook is simpler than it sounds. Just invest in your LSAT score. Seriously invest in your prep. Don't just dabble in it here and there. The difference between a 160 and a 168 can mean over $100,000 in additional scholarship money at real schools in this cycle. And under the new borrowing caps, it can be the difference between having a funding gap and not having one. Just 3 months, serious, focused prep, diagnosing your actual weaknesses, doing timed practice under realistic conditions, getting real feedback, that can move your score meaningfully. Then you do the real math on every single school you're considering. You want to look at your net cost after scholarships under the new limits. You want to look at the school's ABA 509 data on employment outcomes, which bar exam you're going to take, and what happens to the school if enrollment would drop, say, 20%. You want to treat this decision like the 6-figure investment it is. Don't base it on prestige, because the students who look at the real numbers are going to get more value from that law degree than students have in a very long time. Now, the honest version I want to leave you with is this. Law school is still one of the most powerful decisions you can make, and that has not changed. But what has changed is that the old playbook where you pick a school that sounds good, borrow whatever it costs, and figure it out later, that doesn't work anymore. And if you understand that, you're going to come out way ahead. Now, a year from now, some people watching this will be in law school. Some will have made their decision strategically, where they invested in their prep, ran the numbers, verified that their school was stable and strong. Others will have applied on autopilot and hoped for the best. Now, the difference between these two groups in their debt, in their opportunities, in how the next decade plays out, it's going to be the biggest it's been in a very long time. And I would rather you be in the first group. And that's what I do here. I go live every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever you're watching this. Please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives. The algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. So I do appreciate your support in spreading the word, sharing this to your socials on TikTok, for example, sharing it in group chats, Facebook groups, subreddits, Discords, wherever you know other pre-law students. And I'm here to help. I'm also offering free LSAT tutoring lessons for everybody watching this now or later. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn as well. I see a ton of questions here in the chat. Keep dropping them. I'll get to as many of those as I can. I see some that came in. I'll get to them. I'll just scan through here, see what came along here. Bob says, just keep taking practice tests and you eventually hit a 170. I wish it were that easy, right? If it were that easy, everybody would do it. You would just say to yourself, okay, well, there's practice tests on LawHub 101 to 159 or so. I'm just going to do them one by one. And I suspect that you would probably learn something and get better because mere exposure should improve your performance to some extent, just getting more familiarity. But you've also got to review your mistakes. You know, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And so getting more reps without review is, in my opinion, a missed opportunity. You want to look at your practice test results for every test that you take, dig into what you're getting wrong and why, extract some key insights or lessons learned so that you could avoid making the same mistakes again. At LSAT Unplugged, we use a framework called the Socratic Review Method. It's the cornerstone of my courses and coaching programs. The way it works is we ask you a series of guiding questions live in the coaching, and you can also adopt that same process for your own self-studying. Because, of course, we're not going to be there on test day, and we can't take the test for you. And so we got to give you the confidence, the clarity, and the skill to perform when it truly matters. And so we ask you the following questions. For example, was it your approach to the question that led you astray, or was it the text of the question itself? Was it a tempting wrong answer choice, or was it an unappealing right answer choice? If we can get down to the root cause of what you're getting wrong and why, we'll be able to help you avoid making the same mistakes again. And so that is the Socratic Review Method. I have plenty of videos on this on the YouTube channel, LSAT Unplugged. It's in the link in my bio if you want to take a look there for more. F1's asking, what are wait lists looking like? So we are already in March, of course. We're fairly late into the law school admissions cycle. Unfortunately, law schools are taking longer and longer to get back to applicants. This is probably one of the slowest law school admission cycles ever. And so wait lists are looking pretty long right now. So if you've already applied, you're waiting to hear back, just sit tight, get busy with your other application, get busy with the other stuff if you can. Get busy with sending letters of continued interest to law schools, just checking in here and there periodically, letting them know that they're still your top choice. You still want to go there, give them an update of some kind if you can, but don't expect to hear back immediately. You might not hear back for another couple months even. It's crazy. It's not right or certainly not polite of law schools to delay things that long, but they hold all the cards right now, and so you don't really have a choice. But do send a periodic letter of continued interest, maybe once every couple of months. Don't overdo it. Don't be stalkerish or anything like that. But an email here and there certainly wouldn't hurt and could actually help. I see Cripps is asking, can I do both medical school and law school? Okay, well, someone's a glutton for punishment, right? That's a lot to take on. Yes, you can. You can do both medical school and law school. You can get a dual degree like a JD/MD. Not a lot of folks do it, but technically I suppose you can if you want. The question is why? What kind of career are you looking to pursue that would require both a JD/MD? Keep in mind that you'll probably be taking both the MCAT and the LSAT, and you're in for a lot of schooling ahead of you and a lot of tuition dollars as well. All the more reason to shoot for the highest test scores possible to get more scholarship money to offset the debt that you'd be taking on. Just scanning through for more questions here. Seth is asking, if a school separates from the ABA, is that something employers will consider? Well, it depends why they're separating from the ABA. There's two different things going on here. There are schools that have pretty poor outcomes, low bar passage rates, poor employment outcomes, and those law schools might lose their ABA accreditation. And if they do, then they are put on notice and they might no longer be accredited, which would be a big red flag in terms of the quality of the school and the quality of their students as well. Employers would certainly consider that, and that might also put you at risk as well in terms of the value of your JD, your ability to sit for the bar exam. So you don't want to go to a school that's on the edge, teetering at risk of getting shut down or losing its ABA accreditation. Then separately, something you have going on right now is a couple of states, like namely Florida and Texas, that are looking into alternative accreditation pathways, meaning they want to have law schools that are accredited by the state rather than by the National American Bar Association. Now, those schools, which hypothetically are only hypothetical right now, I don't even think there is that pathway yet. There's just the news headlines that they are exploring an alternate pathway. Those law schools might end up being perfectly fine in terms of their quality. The thing is that because they would not be accredited by the National American Bar Association, that JD might not be portable across state lines, meaning that if you go to a law school in Florida or Texas that was not ABA accredited, but rather state accredited, you could practice in Florida or Texas, but you might not be able to practice outside the state. And so can you say with 100% certainty that you're never going to want to leave the state? What if you end up marrying someone who leads you to move to a different state? What if you have a family obligation, like your parents get sick and you want to move back home? Things like that might end up rendering your JD less valuable to have gone to a school like that. In my view, the safest path, the one that keeps your options open, would be to go to an ABA accredited law school. I think it's better to preserve your options, especially if you have decades ahead of you in your career. Yes, that pretty girl's saying, sometimes I wonder if I should have gone to law school before getting my MBA. Maybe. The question is, what do you want to do with your degree? An MBA could certainly be useful, but if you want to be an attorney, then of course you want to have that JD. It could be valuable to have both of those degrees. Regardless, it is what it is right now. And so think to yourself, do I want to go to law school? Do my career goals require a JD? And if so, am I willing to take the LSAT and put 3 years of law school into this to have the JD on the other side for better employment opportunities, depending on what you want to do? A lot of folks go to law school for a second career or as a young professional a little bit later in life. Not everybody's going to be 21, 22 years old. There are plenty of law school students in their late 20s or 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. And there are a lot of different things you could do with a law degree. I see Clemson's asking, can I go work at the FBI after law school? Definitely. There are plenty of attorneys at the FBI. The FBI certainly needs them, of course. And so, yes, you can. You can go into government work. Why not? Keep in mind, though, that when you go into government work, it's not paying quite as well on average, typically, average salaries versus working in big law. And so look at the pay scales for working for government agencies and keep that in mind when you're considering what you're going to pay for law school, what debt you might end up taking on. When you are not going into big law, I would recommend going to a lower ranked school with more scholarship money than a higher ranked school with less scholarship money, minimizing your debt so that you have more options and you're not saddled by the debt payments upon graduating. I see Sol is asking thoughts on Wilmington New School. I mean, there's a lot of law schools out there. There's approximately 200 ABA approved law schools. And when you're evaluating a law school, there are a number of different factors you want to look at. First, you want to think about what law schools can you get into? And that's, in other words, what are the admissions requirements? You have your LSAT score medians and your GPA medians. And those numbers tell you whether you are competitive at a particular law school. If your LSAT score and your GPA are right around or slightly above the medians, you've got a decent shot at getting accepted to that law school. If your LSAT and GPA are above the medians significantly, you become that much more likely to get into the law school. And the higher your numbers are above the medians, the more likely you are to get significant scholarship money, maybe even a full ride. If you are above a law school's 75th percentiles on both LSAT and GPA, you might get significant scholarships, maybe the full ride. If you're below on one median but above on the other, one can certainly counteract the other. And so a lot of folks will come along who have a relatively lower GPA, but can balance it out with a higher LSAT score. And so a higher LSAT can do a lot to offset a lower GPA. And so that's one reason folks invest so much in their LSAT prep, is because their GPA might not be what they want it to be, but the LSAT score is the biggest needle mover they have to improve their odds. And for those just joining, by the way, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. Happy to help you out. Now I see Elizabeth is asking about looking at employment numbers in those 509 reports. And so I talked about the LSAT and GPA from the admissions side. We also have to consider whether a law school is worth attending, not just whether you can get in. So you want to look at what is a given law school's bar passage rates and what are their employment outcomes. Specifically, what percentage of their graduates are employed in a job that requires a JD 9 months after graduation. You want to know that you're not going to end up working at a barista with your JD. That's not why you're investing in 3 years of law school, right? You want to have a job that required your JD. That's why you went after all. And you want to be able to pay off any student loan debt you might have and have a good standard of living, of course, right? So look at bar passage rates and employment outcomes. And these are all relative, right? So it's not like you have to hit a certain number for each of those. It's more like, these are the schools I got into and which one has better outcomes and which one's offering me more money. Those are the two things you want to be thinking about going into this. Now, Sol is asking about predatory law schools based on their curves. The way I would think about schools in terms of whether they are predatory or not is primarily about what kind of scholarship money they offer you and what are the conditions associated with that scholarship money. There is this practice of law schools offering conditional scholarships, meaning the scholarships are not guaranteed, which in my view is kind of sketchy because the law school has a lot more information than you do about your likelihood of meeting the conditions for those scholarships. In other words, there is an asymmetry of information, which from a consumer protection standpoint is kind of problematic, right? Like, you're investing 6 figures in tuition to law school, and you want to know that you're going to end up paying what you expect to pay, not paying much more than that. You don't want the odds to be stacked against you, right? So when law schools offer conditional scholarships, it might go something like this. They say, we are offering you a scholarship of X thousand dollars per semester, provided you can maintain a certain grade point average. Let's say this scholarship will continue only if you stay in the top third of your class. But they offer that scholarship to half of the entering class. And that means that 17% of the people offered that scholarship are guaranteed not to hit it, and likely more, of course. So they, of course, any individual might end up meeting the conditions, but a certain number are guaranteed not to meet the conditions by definition because they made that offer to a lot of people. And of course, everyone thinks they're going to be the one who stays in the top third. But of course, law school's hard. 1L is harder than you're bargaining for, harder than you expected. So of course, it's your first time doing it. How would you know how difficult it's going to be? But the law school knows how difficult it is. And they've been doing this for decades. And they've put thousands of students through this exact process. And so if you have a family issue, an emergency, life is hard, you have a romantic entanglement with a significant other that distracts you, for example, and you get depressed. Like, a lot of things could happen and you can't predict what will, but something could come out of left field. And so what I recommend is holding the line firm and not taking a conditional scholarship, but rather negotiating for an unconditional scholarship, meaning you will get that scholarship money, you will get that discount on your tuition no matter what happens, no matter what your grades are, because there are things that can happen outside of your control. Of course, you're going to law school expecting to do your best and expecting to succeed, but you don't know what might happen. And so you don't want to be tens of thousands of dollars in debt because a personal crisis of some kind happened. So in my view, the predatory law schools are the ones that offer tons of conditional scholarships where the odds are stacked against you. And you can, by the way, look at the stats on these scholarships in the ABA 509 reports. You just Google X Law School 509, and you will find the details on the American Bar Association website. Feel free to keep those questions coming in. Happy to answer anything at all, LSAT and law school admissions. And for those of you just joining, I offer these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. I see more questions coming in here. I see Elizabeth is asking about law schools that are LSAT optional, that don't require an LSAT score at all. Yeah, there are a decent number of law schools that will technically accept students without a test score, but very few students get in without a test score. So for example, of the 42,000 law students entering last cycle, about 41,000 of them got in with LSAT scores, a couple hundred got in with GRE scores, and a negligible number got in with no test score at all. And in my view, if you are applying to law school without an LSAT score, you're leaving money on the table, because the number one way you can get more scholarship money for law school and improve your odds of admission is by applying with strong numbers. A strong GPA is great, of course, but when you apply with a stronger LSAT score, what you're doing is you're helping the law school raise their standing in the US News Law School rankings. And law schools care very much about the law school rankings because that helps them attract more money from donors, from alumni. It also helps them attract more applicants for the following cycles as well. It's determinative of their prestige. And so when you leave that LSAT score a big question mark, it's basically a wash. And in fact, beyond that, I think it's a net negative because you're saying to them, hey, like, my LSAT score probably wouldn't have been that good, because if it was going to be good, I would have taken the LSAT and shown you that it would be good. In other words, the proof is in the pudding, and a big question mark can be a kind of red flag. Now, of course, if you have an incredible resume, work experience, like you are a Fulbright scholar, for example, you've had incredible experiences in politics, for example, you're an Olympic athlete, of course, that can overcome a lot of other negatives or question marks. But in the absence of that sort of thing, I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice by applying without an LSAT score. And one reason that law schools use the LSAT, even if they technically do not have to, is because it is the number one objective metric they can use to evaluate you. With GPAs, the problem is grade inflation. With application essays, the problem is that you could have used AI to write them or could have had other people help you with them. But the LSAT score is the only number. They know it was you taking it, and it's an apples-to-apples comparison across all applicants, regardless of what you majored in, where you went to undergrad, how old you are, what your other life experiences are. And beyond that, the LSAT score is predictive of first-year law school grades, as well as bar passage rates. It has a strong correlation with both 1L grades and bar passage rates. But without the LSAT score, that's all a big question mark, and it could be a red flag because law schools want to know that you're going to do well in first year of law school. They want to know well that you're going to do on the bar exam. I mentioned earlier how in those ABA 509 reports, the metrics include how many of their students pass the bar, how many of them get jobs that require a JD. And the LSAT score is somewhat predictive of those factors. Without that, they don't know how you're going to do. To get a 4.0 in the humanities, unfortunately, is not that difficult because of grade inflation. If you just write a paper and turn it in, or you just write the essays on your exams, they'll probably do decently well. So an A in humanities doesn't tell them a whole lot. In contrast, a 170 plus LSAT score tells them a whole lot more because that's a lot harder to game. Can't say it isn't gameable, of course. There are a lot of reasons why the LSAT is in a problematic position these days. It used to have a lot more predictive validity. That's been watered down a little bit in a couple of different ways. But at this point, still, it is the best remaining metric that is available. And so I think it's worth taking advantage of it. I see a question about online law school for the non-traditional student. I think online law school is great. I wish that there were more law schools offering 100% online education. I think that it's beneficial in terms of convenience for folks who have families, for folks who have kids, folks who are working full-time and unable to relocate. I think it's great for you to have more options than just the one law school that you can commute to that might be an hour and a half away. I'm glad the American Bar Association is opening up more provisional accreditation for law schools to offer totally online degrees. There's an ever-growing list of law schools offering online or hybrid JD programs, but it's not as long as I would like it to be. A couple of prominent examples are Mitchell-Hamlin has a hybrid program. Syracuse has an online program. St. Mary's in Texas has an online program. There are a dozen more or so as well, all listed on the American Bar Association website. Definitely seek them out. Apply widely to them if you're pursuing those. If you're limited to online only, I would blanket all of them because these programs are incredibly competitive. There are not nearly enough seats in these online programs relative to the number of students who want to apply to them. And so the requirements are actually pretty high relative to going to that law school in general. So in other words, it's a lot easier to get into St. Mary's Law School in person in Texas rather than St. Mary's online. There are way more seats available in person than there are online, and way more people applying online than in person. In other words, the supply demand is off a little bit, meaning way too many applicants for the online, but very few seats available for the online. So the requirements are a lot higher than you might think. So if you are applying to the online program, speak to admissions, get a concrete sense of what kind of LSAT score you're going to need given your GPA, and study hard for that LSAT. Just scanning through the chat here for other questions coming in here. Definitely keep them coming in. I see Elizabeth saying, I have a great deal of professional experience, but I did not have the best GPA in undergrad. Yeah, I mean, a ton of folks are in that exact same position. You're going to be a so-called splitter applicant because you have a relatively lower GPA, but you're going to balance it out with a much higher LSAT score to compensate. Additionally, the good news is that the longer you've been out of undergrad, if you are a so-called non-traditional student, the less your undergraduate GPA matters, because who you were at the age of 20 or so is not who you are at the age of 30, 35, 40, or beyond. You've grown, you've matured, you've changed. Law schools will recognize that, and they're going to discount the GPA because it doesn't reflect who you are today. The GPA diminishes in importance the longer you've been out of undergrad, and the more your LSAT score ends up mattering to compensate, since that is the other objective metric they're going to be looking at in your application. And so for that reason, the more you're going to want to focus on raising your LSAT score to get the best possible law school outcomes. And if you want my help prepping for the LSAT, getting that number up, compensating for the lower GPA, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free call with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. What we do during that call is we look at where you are right now relative to your goal LSAT score, and then we map out an action plan, a study plan, to get you from your current starting point to your goal score over that time frame. If you're taking the LSAT in 1 month for April, for example, we're going to run you through a more intensive boot camp style program where you get live coaching 7 days a week. We're taking our standard 3 to 4 month curriculum and compressing and accelerating it into only 1 month. Not the optimal, of course, but if you're studying for the LSAT full time or willing to carve out a lot of time, it's technically doable. What I prefer, though, is a more slow and steady approach where you're studying for the LSAT over the course of, say, 3 months for June or 5 months for August, where we spread it out over the course of maybe 4 to 5 days a week, give you a couple of days off per week. Then you're doing coaching one or two times a week, along with semi-private small group sessions in the evenings, but those are all optional, all recorded for any that you can't make live. You're also getting our comprehensive on-demand course and a custom LSAT study plan as well. We personalize every program for the individual student. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and so for those asking about pricing and programs, book the free tutoring lesson with me, and we'll talk through it more. I always like to customize the student for the individual program to make sure that you're getting the right amount of support given your goal. It's our reputation on the line as well. We do want to get you those results, and a program that's too small might not serve you adequately. A program that's too big might be more than you need, might overwhelm you. So we want to find that sweet spot. And I've been teaching the LSAT personally since 2005. I personally raised my own LSAT score from a 152 up to a 175. And so I've seen what works. I've also seen what doesn't work at the same time. It took me an entire year to get my 175, and at least half of that was a complete waste of time. Very frustrating. If I had done it properly, I could have knocked it out in just a couple of months, because the LSAT is ultimately a test of pattern recognition. If you can spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing it from their perspective. And once you do that, everything changes. And what really matters when you're looking for that top score is getting that direct personalized feedback, because when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. And once we add that personalized support into the mix, there's usually a pretty quick score boost, meaning there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. And so that's why I'm offering this free LSAT tutoring lesson, because I've seen how powerful tutoring can be for our students. And so if you haven't gotten the support yet, if you're just self-studying with videos and drills and textbooks and webinars, but you're not getting anyone really looking at your thought process, helping you find more efficient approaches, getting some targeted personalized feedback, helping you figure out what you're doing wrong and why, helping you find a more efficient approach, it could be a real game changer for your prep. And so if you haven't already, book the free tutoring with me. Again, the link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link's below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. If you find these lives helpful, I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.